Assassin's Promise, Chapter 4, by Thomas Woodward. Kane rubbed his chin, noticing a day's stubble, causing a rough feeling like sandpaper as he brushed his palm over his cheek. Smiling to himself, he climbed the stairs of the inn before catching a last look at the common room. He fancied he had ruined any chances he might have with a young performer on the ramshackle stage, but that didn't mean one of the maids wasn't out of the question. He could return later after the crowd had broken a little to try his chances with one of them before giving in to sleep. His thoughts shifted abruptly to the boy. He was glad to have deflected the lad, and was eager to be off before garnering more interest from the townsfolk. He couldn't afford the attention with his precious cargo. Under disguise, he had gone out of his way to come this direction in hopes he could avoid being recognized, and so far had been successful. He was on orders to be as expedient as possible, and had been given powers to dispatch any that would slow his progress. Kane did not approve of his client in general, but the sum of money had been great, and the request had been desperate. Two things he liked when bargaining a deal that could be used to his advantage. For now, he stepped lightly out of sight and returned to his rooms before bolting the door behind him. An unnecessary measure, to be sure, but nonetheless it comforted him. Kane quickly scanned the room for anything out of the ordinary. He felt his thumb along the edge of the doorframe, and finding the small piece of string undisturbed, relaxed a little bit. Then he went about checking the window panes, and cupped an ear to each wall, quickly listening to ensure there were no eavesdroppers. Expelling a breath he had unconsciously been holding, he threw himself onto the bed and stretched, letting go of any remaining tension. His eyes snapped open as he regarded the ceiling of the room, but nothing stirred. Some thought him overly cautious, but it had kept him alive so far in a profession that didn't hold a particularly long life expectancy. He had worked for many different masters over the years, over several different kingdoms. They were all the same at their heart. All of them had enemies. Enemies they needed to make sure never openly rose against them. Sometimes it required simple blackmail or death threats. Other times, well, he enjoyed his craft. It was nasty work, but someone had to do it. But more than anything else, he enjoyed the feeling of power, the thrill of the chase, and witnessing the stinking fear of his enemies. Sometimes he didn't share the same personal opinion as his master of the moment. It was those times he regretted extinguishing life. But he still took some measure of joy in the kill. After all, he was only a dusty traveler. No one had any trouble forgetting a man who wielded a shadow blade. He rarely let any but of his victims see it, but it had surprisingly powerful effects on human memory. Anyone who looked directly at the blade would forget the last 10 minutes for every second they stared at it. Usually, anyone who had seen him use it would completely forget the contents of the day, as if they had simply never happened. When questioned about their memory, the person would only have the vaguest sense of anything at all. The blade was a powerful artifact which had been held as one of the deepest secrets of his guild of assassins. The dark blade warped the fabric of reality itself, and only those who had trained and built up an immunity to its effects could stand in its presence without ill effect. To someone not accustomed to its resonance, it appeared to be twin blades that revolved around one another in an infinite pattern of light and shadow. The effect was mesmerizing and caused the loss of memory in the short term and insanity under prolonged exposure. Kane had to learn a series of mental knots, which acted as safeguards against losing his mind in the presence of the weapon. They varied, but one of his favorites involved attempting to view an infinity loop in his mind's eye, and then trying to trace its edge while rotating it simultaneously. This had resulted in painful headaches during his training, but allowed his mind to stay preoccupied, and sidestep the reality-unraveling assault of the Shadow Blade while he used it. Kane reached under his shirt, where the scabbard lay against his skin. It felt cold to the touch. If he concentrated, he could feel the slight pulse it made from deep within the thick alloy sheath. It was accompanied by the faintest whining howl that, upon close reflection, devolved into a jumbled mess of tiny voices that melted into the aether and coalesced again into yet other voices. To listen too closely would drive him mad, so Kane quietly began humming a low tune to himself. He smiled, his face contorted in a dark grin. His mind turned to the matters of the coming days. He had been employed to visit the distant cousin of a powerful lord. This particular relative had managed to expose some of his family's plots to take an active hand in the succession of the kingdom of Kaibar. Fearing for his life, and quite rightly so, Kane mused, the cousin had fled to his outer distant holdings in an attempt to wait out the storm. Kane had been sent to ensure no further disturbances arose from this particular royal cousin. He had been given 2 envelopes. One held a message that read, "To my dearest cousin, I have sent my steward, Master Stannon Joval, as a gift. He has served me well in the capital, and for your next naming day, please accept this modest gift to represent a token of my gratitude and goodwill for your political endeavors that have kept our family's name prominent here in the great cloud city of Kaibar." Should Kane be discovered and dealt with by a foreign power, this was to be found on his body, should things not go according to plan. In a different envelope, one hidden in secret pouch sewn into Kane's doublet, under his heavy riding cloak, quite another message was outlined in sharp, terse script on a 1-page letter. Kane had already memorized its contents. Without breaking the wax seal, he saw it in his mind's eye. The thick paper was emblazoned with a heavy seal depicting 2 ravens circling a needle-thin spired city. In the beak of one of the ravens, a small onyx jewel eye sparkled darkly. The message simply read, 4629, none shall witness. Choose now. We watch and wait. There will be no second warning. In the envelope were 2 tiny fire opals. They were barely the size of a child's small fingernail. One was blood red, the other a deep jet. They clicked together softly as they touched in the bottom of the envelope. Before returning the unbroken letter to the hidden pouch stitched delicately into the coat over his ribs, Kane glanced at the raven sigil in black wax. He whistled softly to himself. It looked almost lifelike. Standing abruptly, Kane prowled over to the door of the room. Making a final check, peering through the crack of the door, he slowly turned the handle and silently pulled it inwards before stepping quickly into the darkened hallway. Taking special care with the doorknob to ensure no additional sound was made, Kane pulled the door and intentionally left it ajar. Hiding in plain sight was often the best plan. Curious maid staff would not be nearly as likely to search his room if they found it open. Even in a town as small as this, he wanted to appear as nothing more than a solitary traveler with no secrets to hide. Perhaps one who drank to excess after a hard day's travels. Perhaps one who sought the favor of a bright-eyed serving girl. He smiled indulgently. Yes, with that he would seem no more than a common traveler. Picking up his senses, he effected a casual step and ambled over to the stairway. Rounding the banister, he caught his eyes with one of the maids who was headed upstairs. She looked aloof, but he held her gaze for a moment. Eyes twinkling darkly, he brushed past her and felt the heat of her curious stare for an instant, before making the final bend down to the common room. An amber glow greeted him at the base of the stairway. The hearth roared silently, except for the occasional crackle of wood snapping as it burned. The lamps had been lit over each of the tables and cast a ruddy glow onto the faces of the remaining patrons. A young woman bent to deposit a pair of tankards for 2 men, who whispered, deep in conversation. A yellow cat purred contentedly on a chair near the fireplace. At the far end of the room, Thane was filling the wax lamps at one of the tables, fully absorbed in his work. At a far table across the room sat the fiddler and his partner, who were quietly eating their meal, having finished their performance for the evening. Marie ducked out of the kitchen and pointed sharply at one of the maids. The woman's mouth formed a line, and she swiveled away from Marie and crossed the common room, her eyes hard and polished as flint. She made a show of picking up some dishes at one of the tables under Marie's cool gaze. After a moment or two, Marie retreated back into the kitchen. The maid stuck her tongue out at Marie's receding back before realizing she had been seen. Kane smiled broadly. This would be a good night after all. Hi everyone. If you've been enjoying my content and you'd like to support my channel, you can do so at patreon.com/authorsprocess. And it would mean a great deal to me to be able to keep bringing you great content and sharing it with you on multiple platforms. Here is the page that you will see if you choose to support me. And on this page, you will be able to choose what membership level you could support at. Again, only if you choose to. But we have the initial level dedicated to the arts, and then lover of the arts, patron of the arts, and grand patron of the arts. So what you will receive is early access to my content, and then at the higher levels, your name will be listed at the end of each of my videos in a special thanks section. So again, please consider it. It would mean a great deal to me. And thank you so much again. Even if you're unable to support monetarily, just viewing my content is great support as well. So thank you so much for being here, and I appreciate you.